Hey, welcome to Sister Brunch. I'm Fanchon Cox.
Da-da-da. And I'm Anya Adams.
Hey.
And if you're joining us for the first time on Sister Brunch, we talk about Black women plus working in the media, entertainment, and the arts, and how they broke into it, and also how they're staying in it, and what it takes to make it through.
Anya,
world.
what is this plus thing? What is that all about?
I mean, I was going to ask that
Were you
to
gonna ask
Chris, but I think she means like,
me
Black women plus.
Like so like if you're not a cisgender Black woman,
Maybe.
but you're a transgender Black woman, you belong
Get
here
on
with
this
us. You are
podcast
welcome.
now.
Or a non-binary or like a non-conforming, welcome. We all count. And so what Sister Brunch means is that you are going to hear some great stories about what it's really like, for real, truly like, to work in the industry. And if you want to work in the industry too, or maybe you just want to hear what things are like, but you will hear some inspiration from these amazing guests that we have with us.
And so our guest today is Miss Malarie Howard, and she's a Los Angeles-based screenwriter and musician who grew up as the only Black child or girl in various WASPY communities, which I'm so excited to talk to you about because I also grew up in a WASPY community.
I'm so sorry for that.
I did also have to listen to screaming Christian rock and sing opera, and you love writing fan fiction, which is very exciting. You've had a nomadic childhood, so you traveled around the world or just the States? Was it?
The only time we went outside of the States for 2 years, we lived in Amsterdam.
Ooh.
Yeah.
You're so brilliant. I'm lucky to have worked with you and seen your work. And you've got this original dark comedy, Spiraling, and it's inspired by your personal experience with dealing with mental health while working in the tech industry. And it is set up. Homegirl has an option at MRC Studios, and you're working on the CW's In the Dark.
Mm-hmm.
Your show, when you say it's set up, what's happening with it right now?
MRC purchased it, and it's in development right now. Initially, I wrote it as an hour long, and they bought it as a half hour. So I'm doing the rewriting process right now, and then hopefully it'll go to a network afterwards. Knock on wood.
We're going to get into some of that terminology just for those who, kind of may not know a lot about writing in the industry. This is what's great is that Malarie's one of our first writer guests. So we're really going to dig into what does it mean to be a writer. We're going to get into all of those things. But we always like to just start off by asking, how did you get into this process? Like, what was the journey for you?
Okay. So I think my journey starts with my mom, actually.
Cool.
I was born in LA, and my mom was moved out here from Chicago with my dad for his job. And she needed a job, so she started temping, and she wound up at Paramount. And
Oh, wow.
she really liked the industry, and she was already a writer but had never written a screenplay, and so it made her want to write a screenplay. And then she naturally became a showrunner's assistant to one of the only women that was running a show at the time.
Who was that?
Her name is Susan Seeger. She's no longer a showrunner. She's actually a therapist now.
Oh, cool. What was the show she was running?
Brooklyn Bridge.
Oh, okay.
And my mom, she just kind of mentored my mom, and so my mom started writing. She, at the same moment in my life, it happened for her too when she was like 26, 27. She sold a spec to A Different World.
So a spec script is she wrote an episode of A Different World, and she sold it to the writers or the creator of A Different World.
Correct.
And
they didn't actually produce it.
Okay.
But it was enough to get her agent and a manager, and she was doing all these different, taking all these generals and pitches, and she had like 3 separate meetings with.
Oh my God.
And
You're killing us.
She's gonna hate me for telling this story because she's actually never told it to me. I've only heard it from my dad and my grandmother. It's just very private. And so basically what happened was her very last meeting, she like pitched a sketch and then never heard from them again. And then the next season, her sketch was on the show.
No.
And it crushed her.
Of course.
And she just, I honestly, she stopped writing for like almost 20 years.
Wow.
My goodness.
But she would write my sister and me little storybooks. And that's when I started writing because I wanted to write my sister's storybooks. And then that just kept blooming into other things. When I was in middle school, me and my friend Jamie Johnson, we would write little novellas, and then at recess, rather than like playing on the jungle gym, we would edit each other's images.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
And then I started doing fan fiction because I really just saw a lack of Black people in my favorite movies.
Yes.
That being Lord of the Rings. And I really just had a huge crush on Legolas, and I wanted there to be a Black elf to make out with Legolas.
Yes.
So I wrote that. And then I was done. And then and then I went into I went to a film camp my sophomore year, and it was very sophomore year of high school. It was very editing heavy, and so I thought, like, I don't want to do film anymore. This is boring.
Okay.
And I thought I wanted to be a journalist, which is what my mom studied in college.
Okay.
When I got to Santa Clara, I hated my journalism class, but I loved my screenwriting class.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, this is how I'm a writer. I like this a
Interesting.
lot.
Love it.
And after I graduated, I went to my parents and I was like, thanks for spending all this money. I'm going to go to LA and be poor and try and be a screenwriter. And my mom, her reaction was more of just like reliving the trauma of her experience.
Yes.
And then my dad was more like, no, that's not going to happen at all.
You're going to be an engineer.
Yeah, you need to do something in tech.
Wow.
Like that's the way the world is moving. And I tried it anyway for like about a week, and I didn't realize like you needed to be here a lot longer than a week to get a job. But I only comparatively, like all my friends at Santa Clara studied engineering and business, so they had jobs before they even graduated.
Right, sure.
And,
and plus, your mom had this amazing story where she was a temp at Paramount and then suddenly assisting a showrunner.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And the week I was here, I realized I had to like live off credit cards, and my friends were saying like, hey, $90K starting salary at Uber. And I'm like,
God.
No, I don't want this anymore. So I found a job as a copywriter at a startup in San Francisco, and it was a very interesting experience, which I had a mental breakdown, total mental breakdown, where I was in a psychiatric ward and everything.
Wow.
Which is what Spiraling is inspired off of. But I think like that was a wake-up call not only for me but for my parents as well, because as you guys probably know, like Black people don't really talk about mental illness. And leading up to that point, I told my parents like something's not right, like I feel this way or feel that way, and my dad would kind of write it off as, oh, that's just 20-something problems, like the world's hard. Black people don't have time to be depressed. And my mom she's very religious, so she was kind of like, let's pray about it. And it, sometimes it's a chemical imbalance in your brain, sometimes it's just your environment, or it's traumatic incidences that happen in your life. And so that was kind of the moment where I had to look at myself and honor who I really am. And my parents had to do the same. My mom sat me down and she was like, I think you need to go and try and be a screenwriter for real this time. And she was like, you don't have kids, you don't have a partner, like you are young, talented, and now's the time to do it. And so kind of with her validation, which I needed at the time, I came out to LA and we found a job in a week.
Hey, you are listening to Sister Brunch with Anya Adams and me, Fanchon Cox. We will be right back. Join our community on Twitter at Sister Brunch and also on Instagram at Sister Brunch Podcast.
Hey, we're back. You're listening to Sister Brunch with Anya Adams and Fanchon Cox. Here's more of our conversation with Malarie Howard.
One of my coworkers from the tech job that I had, his old roommate was an assistant at Gersh.
Wow.
Gersh is one of the top 5 talent agencies.
Good. Yes.
He was like leaving as I was coming in, and he was like, oh, a desk job is open. Do you want it? And I said, sure. So I interviewed for it, and I got hired straight to a desk without having to go in through the mailroom. And then everything just spiraled after that into...
When you say at a desk, what does that mean at an agency?
It's exactly what people are picturing. It's
sitting at a desk.
It's sitting at a desk, and you're answering phones, and you're scheduling, and
You're repping one agent or two agents?
I
or?
had one agent. And luckily he was in TV Lit, so I got to read a ton of scripts.
Great.
And
when you so you read these scripts, what to say? Hey, this is a really good script. Were you kind of reading them for him, or just
a little bit of both?
Okay.
I would read for him, but I would also
Amazing.
read for myself, and I learned a lot from reading scripts that I did not like.
Yes.
More than reading, the scripts that I would read in college, which are all great,
Right.
brilliant, like Oscar award-winning screenplays. And I had to read a lot of stuff that were just like incoming from people he met at a party and was like, yeah, I'll read your script, and he was never going to read it.
Right.
And so I just saw like a lot of the stuff that
There's a
I
little
thought
tidbit.
worked didn't really work when I saw it in somebody else's screenplay.
Right.
Can we talk about those
Yeah.
things? Like, of course, for all of us, there's our own perspective, but could you talk about some general things that if you're sending a script into an agent, these things should be part of that script?
Well, I think the first thing is to decide, and neither one is better than the other, but really decide if you want to be a creator or a writer. And I think there's a huge difference. I think really good writers are able to adapt whatever the showrunner's voice is. So they're really good on staff.
Okay.
So they have a lot of versatility. But like a creator, I think it's harder for a creator to be in a room because they only hear their voice.
Right.
And if you want to be a creator, it's going to be a little bit harder because a lot of executives don't want to take a chance on new people, and they want to see that you have room experience first. So, I mean, it's great if you can do both, but if you want to be a creator, like just actually having a very specific voice, like voice really matters. A lot of what you learn in college as far as structuring a screenplay, like some of that you kind of have to throw out the window.
Okay.
For example, in Spiraling, I had a lot of music cues in it, and my professor, who I gave the script to him, and he was like, take these out, this is for the music supervisor. And it was really important to me to have those music cues in it, so I like just kept them in. And then cut to Insecure comes out, and like music is such a big part of that show.
Yep.
And then even in Big Little Lies, I think that's another show where like music is very important, and it's like woven through the story in a very natural way. So that kind of validated my instinct that like I as a musician as well, like music is important. It sets the tone for like this specific scene, and it also can be like a character beat, what they're listening to. And like my character in Spiraling, which is based off of me, she's a black girl, and she listens to a lot of alternative music, which is like you don't really see that represented on the screen. So it's important that you show her listening to the Smiths,
Yes.
I also think that, like, as a director, reading a script like that, when you're reading the music cues, it helps inform, like, tone and visual kind of cues that you're going to put into this, piece and collaborate with the writer. And if you've layered that in already, it's just such a better script for me as a director to read.
That's good to know.
Yeah, I think it's valuable.
That's
so
awesome.
That's really interesting that they told you not to do it. I think it's because of money, maybe.
Probably because of money, and I think it's maybe just remnants of older Hollywood.
Yeah.
Where everyone did their own job, and
Right.
I think we're moving into a space where everyone kind of does a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Can you go back to that point about voice as an example of if you want to be a writer, it's okay to say I have a very specific experience, and that's what's going to come out in my writing. I mean, is that what you mean by voice?
Definitely. And I got that advice from a coordinator at Gersh at the time. I wrote a spec for girls.
Okay.
And I had her read it, and she was like, nobody's reading specs anymore. And a spec is basically just, writing an episode of a show that already exists. And so my fix was to just change all the names, but I kept the story the same. And then I gave it to a different coordinator
And called it a pilot
and called
instead
it
of
my
a
pilot,
spec.
original
Awesome.
pilot.
What
and
a great
she
idea.
read it, and she was like, this sounds like a girl's knockoff. And she told me you should write something that's so specifically you and that nobody else could write it. And that's why I wrote Spiraling.
Now, so then what are the barriers for a Black girl to do that, right? Because then I know from experience getting pitches or getting great pitches that are centering Black girls and women and then taking it to a company and them being, we've experienced it. So how do you navigate that, both being yourself and being your voice, but also knowing that the industry may come back to you and say, either we've got too many of those, which is always a lie, or...
you have to expect a lot of executives to compare you to the Black creators that already exist.
Exactly, right.
So even though my show is very much not insecure, everyone's like, oh, it's kind of like Issa Rae. And I'm like, not really. Thank you. I love her, but that is not my voice at all.
Right.
And were they saying that even though it was an hour long?
They were still saying that. I think it's just they saw a quirky Black girl and they were like, this is Issa. And because Issa is the only character we have right now.
Yeah.
Which
that
is
they
interesting.
have to refer to.
Exactly.
Right. Which is interesting because I remember like when I was younger watching sitcoms and you'd see like King of Queens at the same time as Still Standing, which is about like working class white families and it's essentially the same show.
Totally.
But they see it so differently because it's too, like white people can be different, but like
white people are the baseline.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're just
but you have a quirky Black girl, then you're trying to be Issa.
Right.
And so you kind of have to fight through that and just kind of know that that's going to happen. And just fight for your voice and fight that you're different. Executives like to box in people of color. And
I would say, I mean, I definitely think it's people. I think it's women. It's
Women,
anyone. It's
queer
anyone.
people,
You just you just come out there. You got one idea, and they're like, oh my God, you are that person.
Right.
And you have to really start, like you're saying, you have to really fight to show your diversity and work to be able to express the fact that you have these diverse capabilities.
Right.
So once you do get something sold, you want to kind of think about like, what's my next step, and do I really do another? If it's gonna be something about mental health, it better be effing good.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Or it's set like in the 1800s.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Like how do I diversify this and really build upon it and
Right.
still show my skill? This is Sister Brunch with Fanchon Cox and Anya Adams. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in a moment.
Did you know what this is? Were you in your head like, what is this? I'm going to tell you. It's Sister Brunch with Anya Adams and Fanchon Cox. Now back to our interview. For me, something that's exciting about having a younger person with us and talking about your experiences, because like the fact that they've said, we want you to go from hour to half hour or vice versa. There was a period where if you were writing hour, that was all you were going to do in the same way that we're saying, like, this is the thing you do. And even just formatting the script looks different, right? And but now there's Quibi, which is 10-minute episodes, right? Or there's all these different options. And we're even saying, oh, if this doesn't work as a show, let's try it as a film. And I think fortunately it's more and more flexible around that.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Get Out was when I realized, like, oh, I can do whatever I want. Because I think Jordan Peele had been boxed in as a sketch.
Yeah.
Not even, like, comedy,
no,
but just like,
sketch.
Such a good point.
Key and Peele.
What a
Yes.
Right.
And he was on Mad TV before that, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
so and for him to make a horror film.
Yes.
Right. That was so good.
That was
so
scary.
Good. And a little funny.
And good because.
And it was still his voice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then go to the Twilight Zone. It's like, I realized, I can really do whatever I want. I'm not going to only write one thing.
How do you keep yourself motivated and moving through this experience? Because you are one of the blessed that did get your word out, your voice out. You got something sold. But what do we tell people that, one foot in front of the other? How do you do that?
That's a good question. I think this is going to sound weird, but I know that I had to hit rock bottom for me. And I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I hit rock bottom in an industry and in a world that I didn't care about.
Interesting.
Because it was bound to happen at the agency because of the environment that I was in. And so once I hit rock bottom in tech and then went to therapy and started putting myself back together, once I sat at a desk at an agency where agents are literally yelling at their assistants. My agent never verbally abused me, and I feel lucky that he didn't. When that should be the norm. It's like I had to realize that even though everyone around me is acting like the stakes are really high and that it's serious, like it's not that serious. And realizing like what really is important, like you're here to learn, do your job well. If your boss calls you an idiot because you forgot to add a period at the end of a sentence, like that's your boss's problem.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing is like you get fired in the agency for stupid reasons. And a lot of assistants think if I get fired, it's the end for me. And that's why they're so like, because they want it so bad. They really, really want to be in this world. Yeah. You're going to bounce back. Like, I think that's the thing is like, it's never over, remembering that. And then also, I think finding good people and realizing like, just because someone might make you look good in your career doesn't mean like they're good for your health and good to hang out with.
Oh my goodness.
And then it sucks because like therapy is like so good for you, but it's really expensive.
It's really effing expensive.
It's really expensive.
Were you able to find a Black woman or a person of color, and was that important to you?
You know, one of the things that I learned in this industry too that is really good for I think people of color and women and queer people to hear is that just because someone looks like you doesn't mean they're here for you.
Word
up.
Say that.
Snaps are happening.
And so I thought at one point it was really important for me to find another Black woman to talk to. And there were certain things that, yes, only a Black woman could understand. Like at the time I was very confused about Trump had just won, and I was like in a interracial relationship, and I was like, I'm with a colonizer, and I was like, had needed to talk to a Black woman about that, but that was really the only thing, and then everything else, like I just needed someone who could understand me, and it didn't matter what they looked like.
Yeah. Are you comfortable talking more about mental health? I think that's something we don't talk about or share also, if you're comfortable.
So when I was in high school, I had a lot of anxiety. We moved around a lot growing up, and I think that had a lot to do with it because I never had a stable home, like physical place. And so my sister and I were each other's best friends. I was constantly meeting new friends and then losing them. And once I got to high school, growing up in WASPY communities.
Very white, yeah.
The one that we grew up in Washington was a lot more, I felt more relaxed because I saw other people of color around me, no Black people, but I saw a lot of like Asian people.
Okay.
But when I got to high school in San Diego, I went to a very small Christian school. I was the only Black kid. And San Diego is very conservative and very racist. And for the first time, I was like experiencing actual, like what I felt was like racism. Like before I had like, oh my God, your hair is like cotton. But it wasn't in a way of like I hate it. But it was just like I've never seen that before. But in San Diego, it was like, Mallory, do you have watermelon in your lunch today?
Wow.
Mallory, where's your fried chicken? Like stuff like that, where it's like, oh my God. So I was dealing with that, and then also moving, and then my parents, and then trying to find friends, and I started self-harming, and I think I saw, like, I found it from like the emo music I was listening to. And my mom saw she saw like a scar, and she started crying. I've only seen my mom cry like 3 times in my life. My dad cries all the time, but my mom, like, she barely cries. And her solution was like, let's pray about it and let's not talk about it afterwards. So the only reason why I really stopped cutting was because I felt guilty for hurting her, but like the issues had not been addressed.
Still there,
And then in college, I was the victim of sexual assault, and so I also didn't know how to process that either. And then also going from a very strict upbringing to like college, I went off. I did everything. and didn't have any structure or anyone to really talk to about like the new pain I was feeling, because my first kiss was when I was 18. Like I didn't mess with boys until college, so I was having all this new experience, new pain, new like didn't have anyone to talk to. And then once I graduated and started in the workplace, it was now bills and loans. And I had all this financial pressure. My parents were finally divorcing, so I couldn't really ask them to help me out. And the nature of tech, you're like getting in at like 6-7 a.m. and you're working till like 11 p.m.
Wow. Yikes.
And then because it was a startup, it was so small and everyone was like under the age of 35, so it was like college 2.0, where like after work we'd go get
drinks.
Go get drinks and get really drunk, and it just like all blended in together. And I started feeling like inadequate at work, and so for the first time ever I was like, maybe I should try Adderall. Which is what my friends would do in college to like stay up and finish their papers. And later on realized like Adderall can sometimes not be okay for someone with anxiety problems. That just like there was a week where I was just like taking unprescribed Adderall, and then I had done Molly for the first time with my friends. And sorry, Mom. And it just like all just snapped. And I remember feeling like I need a break so badly. I knew that I needed to step back, but I didn't think I could ask for help because I thought it was going to make me look weak or incapable of being an actual adult. I felt like, I remember praying, it's really, really dark, but like praying a car would hit me so I could just like be in the hospital and like recuperate. And it wasn't my fault. I wasn't because I was weak. It was because somebody else hit me. And so there was like a happy hour. I got really, really drunk, and one of my friends at work just could tell that I was like not okay, and I was like saying weird things. And when I went home, I drank more, and then I like took a ton of Advil and was texting my family and friends like these really dark, cryptic, like goodbye, I'm sorry for tomorrow, like texts.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
And nobody really thought I was about to do something. Because that's the thing about mental illness, is you can project like
normality.
everything's fine.
She's fine.
So everyone's like, oh, Mallory's just drunk again. Like,
Right.
she's so sad and like what dramatic. But my friend that I worked with was like, no, something's wrong. So he actually came to my apartment, pulled me in an Uber and Ubered me to the ER, and they put me on a 5150 hold because which is like in California, they can keep you for I think up to 72 hours against your will, essentially, if they think you're a endangerment to yourself or to other people. And so honestly, like it was one of those situations where I felt like I could have lied my way out of it, but it was basically my car hitting me. Like I knew that I needed to be here and like actually take this break, even though it was like really traumatic.
Yeah, sure. Join our community. You can join us on Twitter at Sister Brunch and also on Instagram at Sister Brunch Podcast. Now back to our interview.
So I was in the hospital for 3 days, and it was really interesting just being around people who look like our expectation of someone who struggles with mental illness. Like my roommate I think she was schizophrenic. Like and she was like talking out loud to herself. So it's the things that we see like on TV or we see like sadly in Skid Row, and so we think like, oh yeah, that's mental illness, but we never think like the person sitting at the desk next to us might be struggling, you know. And that's when I saw that it's such a spectrum, and I needed to be there just as much as everybody else that was in the hospital.
Mallorie, I have to say this, we're so grateful for you sharing this. Circle back to your point about voice, because what you did for us just now is to show exactly that the piece that you wrote, that you got to option, was literally specifically connected to who you are and your voice. And I think it's such a great piece of inspiration to say, we truly want to hear your story. So I thank you for that. It's amazing.
I mean, obviously you wrote this piece and it's based on you, but you sitting here and actually like rawly telling us the story is so brave, and I'm really thankful that you did it as well, because I think our listeners can really like learn something from what you've just talked about personally.
Thank you.
And also, like, I think one of the things you touched on, because I feel like I struggle with it, is this like, I don't even know, it's not walking depression, but like this thing where you're operating
the cloud,
you're smiling,
and then,
but there's all this shit going on, and it's so true. The person beside you could be going through some shit, and it may not look like schizophrenia, but it's so important, like you were saying, your friend, you know, like to actually key in on people that you care about and really listen to what they're doing and what's happening with them. And so you can care for them.
And I think, and not to, you know, like get on my friends who didn't reach out, but I think it's like, I think some people are so afraid that they're going to be wrong and then insult you because it has our mental illness has such a stigma in our culture that it's like, oh, if I ask Mallory if she's depressed or if she's okay, she's going to get mad at me for thinking she's crazy. Which is like not worth it. Like always, if you think something's wrong with your friend or a family member, like you should always say something, and if they're mad at you, then they're mad at you, but at least, you know, they know you care about them.
Exactly. That's the baseline of it.
Definitely.
Thank you, Mallory.
That's so cool.
Oh my goodness.
Sorry, Vanchin, you can jump to the
Well,
like,
now I just feel like a fool. What do you like for brunch? But it is a Sister Brunch podcast, so we do like to know if you have any favorite brunch
when you're
items.
hanging with your friend.
I like a Aperol spritz.
Yes.
All right.
High fives on that.
You wait.
Make that can alcohol be my favorite?
Ooh, of course it can be.
I am celebrating in the corner here.
Oh,
it's so good.
Okay.
It's bitter. If you like bitter.
It's good. Okay. I don't mind. I don't mind a little bitter.
If you were to give some girls coming up or some women who are transitioning from CFO, they want to be a writer, what do you tell them?
Go with your gut. Just because people look like you doesn't mean they're here for you. Always trust your voice, even if other people don't get it. And trust that if you put the right people in your life that you trust, when they give you constructive feedback, you should take it and listen to them. But only from people you trust.
There you go.
That's very good.
So, thank you, the amazing Malarie Howard. She is the writer on In the Dark, and she's also the creator of the dark comedy Keep an Eye Out for It, called Spiraling. And we are so, so glad to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's it. Thanks for listening to Sister Brunch. I'm Anya Adams.
And I'm Fanchin Cox.
Join us next time.
Yeah,
when
come
we talk
on
to
through.
more people.
We do learn lessons.
lessons.
I mean, really, I'm learning so much. I might change my job.
Me too. Follow your dream, girl.
Exactly. Join our community on Twitter @SisterBrunch and also on Instagram @SisterBrunchPodcast.